Chapter 10. The Storm Breaks. Hardly a sound could be heard as the two boys crept across the 50 yards which separated them from the old mine house. Indeed, the silence which brooded over them all was uncanny. The silence hung that heavy you was half afraid to speak. Chad found Kipling's line running through his head as he paused a moment behind a gorse bush to see what was the best line of approach. The mine house stood on a mass of reddish earth and rock, the dump from the mine, and had a most desolate appearance. It was built of granite and roofed with slabs of stone, some of which had slipped off. One thing was in his favour. There was no window in the side they were approaching, so it was not likely that they would be seen unless anyone came out. For another thing, the hill rose so steeply behind the house that the wall on that side was only half as high as it was in front. If he and Clive could reach the house, they could lie hidden behind it, and listen for as long as they liked without much chance of being discovered. There was not a sound from the building, not a sign of life, and presently they were both safe behind it. Chad pressed his ear against the wall and for a long time kept quite still. At last he dropped down beside Clive. "Can't hear a thing," he whispered. "If it hadn't been for seeing that man, I'd never believe there was anyone here." "Don't worry," came a jeering voice. "There's someone here all right, and been waiting for you all day." They looked up to see a tall, hard-faced man with a skin dark as a Spaniard standing over them. Chad was on his feet in a flash. He did not hesitate a second, but charged straight at the man. The force of his rush knocked the fellow right off his feet, but as he fell he grasped Chad and pulled him down too. Clive sprang to the rescue, only to be confronted by a second man, who seized him by the collar and swung him round. This second man was shorter than the other, but almost as broad as he was long. His strength was tremendous, and Clive was helpless in his grasp. "No use you fighting, young shaver," he remarked. "Just keep still and no harm won't come to you. You got the other, Jake?" "I got him, Ben," said the long man, "and I'll learn him to try his games on me." "You'll leave him alone, Jake," said Ben curtly. "I don't blame him for trying to get away. Reckon you'd have done the same in his place." Jake dragged Chad roughly to his feet. He was scowling angrily, yet Ben, it seemed, was boss, for Jake did not carry out his threats. Ben spoke. "You two'll come along inside and quietly, if you know what's good for you." "Why?" demanded Chad. "What business have you to make us prisoners?" "That's a question as I ain't answering," said Ben. "We don't mean you no harm, but you just got to stay here for the present." "Kidnapping us? Is that your game?" Clive jeered. Ben took no offence. "Never mind what our game is. You'll know if you live long enough," Jake broke in. "Are you going to stand here jawling all day?" he asked angrily. "There ain't no hurry," replied Ben. "With this here mist no one can't see us from any distance. All the same, we'll go along in. Come on, son. It ain't no use trying to fight me. You're a lusty lad, but I could handle 6 like you." For a moment there was a dangerous gleam in Chad's eyes, but it passed. What Ben said was probably true. It was no use fighting and getting hurt. He and Clive must save their strength for a better chance. He shrugged. "All right, we'll come," he said. "But you can take it from me there'll be police after us pretty soon." "That ain't worrying us, none whatsoever," Ben answered calmly, as he led the boys round the corner and into the mine house. Inside, the long, narrow room was very dark. The 2 windows were so thick with grime that they let little light through. Still there was enough to see that the place was utterly ruinous and almost bare. The only furniture was an oil stove, a few cooking pots, and a couple of packing cases. There were 2 beds made of heather, with old horse blankets spread on them. Nothing else. The floor was earth. The narrowness of the room was the first thing that struck Chad. Then he saw that there was a door in the inner wall, and realised that the mine house was divided into 2 rooms, an outer and an inner. Ben saw him looking at the door and grinned. "Yes, that's where you're going, son. You'll find a friend there already." Him as you come after, I reckon. Chad bit his lip. It made him furious to think how he and Clive had run their heads into this trap. Jake chuckled nastily. We knowed as you'd come. Seed you top a tall royal. You just walked into it. Chad went rather white. With him, this was not a sign of fright, but of anger. Yet he remained silent. Ben looked at Jake. Likely you wouldn't have done no better yourself, he remarked. Not if you'd been in these kids' shoes. He turned to the boys. Come right in here, he said as he opened the inner door. You won't come to no harm if you behave yourselves. You got Ben Grint's word for that. It was darker still in this inner room, for the only light came through a window in the roof, and that was nearly covered with rubbish and dirt. Indeed, it was so dark that it was not until the door had been slammed and locked behind them that Chad saw Jan lying stretched on a bed of heather by the wall. Jan, he said quickly. Jan, are you hurt? Jan got up stiffly. So they got you too, he said bitterly. I was feared they would, and no way of warning ye. No, I bain't hurt, Mr. Chad, none to speak of. But what does it all mean, Jan? Chad asked, bewildered. Jan came nearer. I reckon they wants us out of the way, he whispered. That's how come. Out of the way, repeated Chad, more puzzled than ever. Surely, said Jan. So us can't hinder them going arter the horde. Chad's eyes widened. So did Clive's, for that matter. You mean that these fellows have got wind of the treasure and want a clear field to get hold of it? Chad asked in a sharp whisper. I bain't got no proof, but that be my notion, Jan told him. Chad drew a long breath. He was so horrified that for the moment he could find no words. Clive was the first to speak. Then somehow we've got to get loose, he said, and, though he kept his voice low, there was no doubt he meant it. Get loose, Chad repeated bitterly. What chance have we got against these two? That fellow Ben is as strong as the lot of us put together. Jan beckoned them to come closer. You'm right, Mr. Chad, he whispered. Us can't fight them chaps. Only thing will be to sneak out without them seeing us. Aye, and us can do it, I reckon. You listen to me now. Before he could say any more, the gloom was lit by a livid flash, and thunder bellowed across the moor, sending crashing echoes from tor to tor. It's the end of chapter 10. Good night and sleep tight.